Now you're probably asking yourself, why are we out in the front yard this morning? And how does this tie to anything in our playlist and our videos and what we teach and the business itself? What we're going to talk about today is the importance of helping folks planting food plots to understand the importance of organic matter and water retention. Two different things, both focused on the same goal, and how that ties to food plots. I think the disconnect with a lot of food plotters, they don't understand the importance of having the correct organic matter, followed by underlying of the right water retention. So we're going to walk through kind of what to create and how to understand it, so you can use it in a food plot situation to get the best bang for your buck, if you will. In these, in our business, we used to not only do the analysis packages, but I would go in, obviously I still do, I go through, and at the end of that, you get a full, at the end of the analysis package, you get a full proposal for me to do the full project at hand. Or the reason I do that is so the customers can take that proposal and they know per phase that has to be done what it should cost them, whether they have me do it or not. In that phase, or in those phases, one of them phases, I used to offer planting food plots, and we do the videos, we teach, and so you guys can follow along, and so I can kind of take that air step out of it, if you will. But I don't offer that service anymore to my clients as far as planning the food plots. We still go through, and obviously I list that all out, what you should be planting, how much per acre, your lime and your fertilizer, and how that all ties together to get you to a successful food plot, whether that's a perennial or an annual. But the reason I don't offer that anymore is because folks don't understand the value, and it's just a money thing. They don't understand having what it takes to really create the bottom line, to get you the right organic matter in the right water retention to make those plots successful. And when you're doing new plots, as a lot of these projects that I'm doing, doing the analysis package on putting these plots in the right spots, a lot of that comes with new plots and new plot work, whether that's extending the end of existing plot, or putting new plots in switchgrass fields, or blowing these plots in timber. It all creates, starts by creating the proper footing. Now, water retention is something that's why I'm here in the front yard, and a lot of folks always ask, as I refer to this, as I always ask folks, is in your yard. Most country settings, the city is different, obviously, but if you live out in the country, if you're fortunate enough to wake up in the morning and have views like this and be able to drink your coffee in the backyard with no sounds of the concrete jungle, if you will, you'll notice in your yards, it doesn't take very long, you notice in your yards that there's always a greener spot than the rest of the yard. There's always a spot where the grass is greener, thicker, lusher, grows quicker, you have to mow it more. That is the perfect example of water retention in organic matter. What that is obviously it's the drain field, your septic system, out in in front or behind your house. That will continually do that through droughts. It will continuously be the best performing area in your yard. And the reason is not because of the organic matter on top of the soil that you're building. In this situation, this is an example, like in your drain fields, it's an example of organic matter that's actually built under the soil, that's fertilized, obviously, by human waste, water. That water retention has soaked, or it reached that water retention level because it has saturated the ground. The ground is now full of nutrients. It's full of there's no leach base to it. The soil is not porous, and it doesn't have the effect that it does 5 feet from it, where the drain field stops, where the water doesn't get out, disperse it to, and your heat from your tank obviously will from your septic tanks obviously travels down that drain field, and it's warm, keeps that warmer. In the winter, if you notice, you look out, there's snow in your field or your yard, and that area above that tank or out in the drain field itself is thaws out quicker. The reason is that heat that builds from the waste in the tank transfers out into the septic system, and that just generates heat, and it's also creating organic matter. So there is water retention. So there's a layer of organic matter that stays nice, flush, and firm on the top that you're building. And in this case, in a yard, you're not adding to it, you're not building to it like we want to in food plots, but you're getting that ever so important water retention below it. That's what keeps this your yards in these areas performing like they do. In a food plot world, what that is 95 to 98%, it's an extremely high number, of food plots properties that I visit, the food plots aren't in the greatest shape, is because of the soil conditions. And at no fault of landowners at all, and I always say this, is food plotters, hunters in general, yes, there's a lot of hunters that are farmers, don't get me wrong, but food plotters aren't farmers. We're not ag cash croppers. And the reason it is, not that we couldn't be, not that we're not smart enough to be, not that we don't own our own hobby farms or farms in general. Problem is, it's an equipment thing. We don't relatively have the common hunter, if you will, doesn't have the money or the backing or the banking to get the funding to get the big tillage tools that the ag farmers have. So that's why I've always tried to find a system that I could present to my customers that I knew that would help them be successful in their food plots. And what I'm switching everything to is there's always a situation that comes up where folks don't want to try this or whatever the case is, because it's it's a clover alfalfa situation. Every case is different, obviously, and you guys know that. But my biggest push right now is to get everybody focused on the buffalo system, and giving credit where credit is due. If you Google or look through YouTube and follow Grant Woods at all with Growing Deer TV there. Grant started this years ago down in Missouri on his proving ground farms, and it's a system that has taken over the industry. There's other guys that implement this as well, that try this. I know Jeff Sturgis out in Wisconsin. There's all kinds of guys that do kind of a no-till base, but I feel that the buffalo system, the way Grant explains that, really helps folks get to where they need to be as far as having these food plots successful. And what it is, obviously, you're planting rye and or buckwheat in the spring of the year, and then in the fall you're going in and you're after you've got that nice lush stand, that hard stem count. Rye and buckwheat both are high in the stem count, and it's a really heavy product to begin with. And then you're going in the fall, and you're actually simple as broadcasting your brassica blends right in that first week of August. You're going in there and you're broadcasting that right in. Now all you have to have is a hand spreader to plant your rye and your buckwheat. You could have done that with a hand spreader in a cultipacker or in an ATV or garden tractor, small tools that most of us have. And you go in and you let this stuff grow, plant it, make sure the fertilizer and your lime is correct when you plant this rye and buckwheat in the spring, in June-ish. And it all comes up after that soil temperature takes the right hold, all comes up and gives you a great crop going into August. So then, like I said, you make your brassica blends. I like red radish, I like turnips, and Austrian winter peas is a lot of the blends that I use. But there's 100 different things that you can use, and I always fit that need to the customer, the client, and the property. So there's always other things that you can add to it. But what we do is I recommend, so you're meeting the requirements, you're helping the deer along through the summer, where you don't have to overcome, you don't have to be the area influencer, as far as you don't want the clover and the alfalfa blends, or the alfalfa blends have their places. But what I see a lot of failed food plots in the summer because of that combination of a perennial plot has to be maintained, has to be more than maintained by just a lawnmower or a mower behind a tractor. And what happens is folks don't have the time, and they don't understand chemicals, and they fail. These food plots fail, and they might look, if they are successful at all, they're going to be successful in June, July. And then when you get to August, September, October, and beyond, into the peak season of the hunting season, your food plots are failing. And I'd rather see just the opposite of not having the mass crop, if you will, in the summer. Because folks, look at behind me. They're as green as far as the eye can see. It's a green carpet. These deer don't need your summer food plots to survive. You are not the make or break point, especially on small parcels. Now, like I said, the bigger the parcel is, the more that plays into it. But planting the groceries for the fall, you've heard that term used for years, and that goes, up outside of the spectrum of corn. It goes into food plots as well. So, having this stand of rye and brassicas, and then rye and your buckwheat, and then going in and broadcasting, as simple as, if you have a tractor to use, or you have a spreader to use behind your ATV, that's great. But going in with a bag spreader, spreading this brassicas out, and right before, time it right before rain, and then you take your cullet packer. Then in that day, you take your cullet packer and you smash that down, or your crimper. Crimpers are the best, but they're expensive. You can make your cullet packer into a crimper, and the farm that we're hopefully going to be purchasing here, the house farm that we're on right now will be on the market, and hopefully I've got my eye on a couple parcels who will be able to really show you this in depth, because those parcels will be completely, all my food plots are going to be in the system. But going through and crimping this down, and you're actually killing that stem on that rye and the buckwheat over top of your brassicas. You're creating a mulch layer, and by creating a mulch layer, you're adding to the organic matter in your food plots, versus tilling them and scattering that debris all over. And a lot of times when you mow, and you've all seen this, when you go onto a food plot and that's been mowed, you'll have dead spots in the food plot. And what that is you're putting too much on, like folks try to use a finish mower or a lawnmower on your food plots. And what it does is you can't evenly spread the thatch or the debris over the entire area. So you leave these strips. Well, that strip it's too much, and then it's not enough. It's too much, and then it's not enough. With this system, it lays everything down. You crimp or you roll your whole food plot area on top of your brassicas. So you're color packing it, and you're killing the stem of the rye and the buckwheat at the same time. And then you're going in, you're implementing 2 quarts of glyphosate per acre on the food plot, right on top of the area, right on top of the rye and the buckwheat, and that kills that. And not only have you broke the stem, now you're guaranteeing. And the glyphosate is a pre-emergent, and there's a lot of different pre-emergents, but gly is the used a lot in our world in the food plotting industry. And what that does is it makes sure that is dead, but it's a pre-emergent, and that will not kill your seed, because the pre-emergent side of the world is it has to be your food plots, your plant has to emerge. In other words, it has to be a couple inches tall, it has to germinate, has to be growing. And then if you were to spray it with glyphosate, yes, you'd kill it. But if you spray it right on top of that thatch, above your that rolled down thatch above your brassicas, you're not going to kill them seeds. And by doing that, you're packing that in the ground. And folks, let me tell you, I've been on the farms that I've got my clients turned on to this, and I've done this myself, and we're going to be doing more of it. And there's guys out in the industry that have done it a lot longer than me, but I am switching my clients over, and it's because of a couple of reasons. More of a higher success rate for my customers, my clients, and property owners in general, and also building organic matter on the top. So you're taking not the greatest soil. So there's a lot of these plots I go into are a sandy loam. They might have a clay loam, a little bit of clay loam to them. They're either too dry or they're too wet. There seems like there's no in between, and it just that ties to making sure that food plot is in the right spot. But what you're doing on the organic matter side of it is you're creating this from the top up versus the water retention from the top down, because most of these plots that I go into don't have the water retention from the top down to hold this. So the only way to get that, you'd have to you know, the Dairy Dew product that we use, that Morgan's Composting, that 844, is a great product for it. And you can get there with lime plantings or rye plantings, making sure your lime and your fertilizer is correct, tilling it under. But you're taking a long way to do that, because you're interrupting the soil, you're killing the earthworms that are needed to promote this, all this worm casting. Obviously the Dairy Dew product has that in it. So if you connect the dots between the product like that, that's very successful, very strong, we use it ourselves. When you first do these plots, I highly recommend fertilizing them. Like I said, a new plot is 600 pounds per acre, or a plot that you're redoing, you can do 400 pounds per acre of the 844, the Morgan's Composting Dairy Dew. And the reason that is, guys, is the worm casting and the manure and everything is in there is what you're trying to create and save yourself, so you don't have to do that fertilizer side of it down the road. Because if you look at this product or this Buffalo system, this implementation that we're speaking of, what you're doing is in these food plots, you're creating worm bedding. You're creating a shaded, cool atmospheres for all this the living organisms to stay alive, not to kill them by disking. So it's a huge touchy world out there as far as telling folks that you don't have to disc anymore. I own a plot master. I obviously help sell them through Morgan's Composting. Morgan's is the state dealer here in Michigan, and I have one. I've got a $6,000 machine sitting right down there in the shop, and it's strictly used now for personal and educational tool, and it's also just used for opening new plots, the initial plot, because after you get this system into rotation, you never have to use a disc again. I know it goes against everything we've been taught, but it's a huge weed control. You don't have the volume of weed. Now you don't have to spray going into the fall after your brassicas take over and start growing. It's way cooler. You have all these living organisms that are in there that take over, that help promote the fertilizer. Guys are being more successful, so now you're adding organic matter to the top, because after you plant that, you get your brassicas to grow. Then in the spring, you do the same thing. You come back in June again the following year after your brassicas are up after the season. You come back in, you can frost seed before then, or you can wait till spring and you simply go in and you take your rye and your buckwheat and you broadcast it right back over the top of it. What's there, you pack that in again. Your rye and your buckwheat come up through it, and you start this process again. Now, no-till drilling is the best way to start the process in the spring of the year. So you do this program, you get through your brassica plantings, you have a successful fall, you meet all the requirements that the deer need. You go all the way through the winter. The deer are using it. You start back in the spring of the year. The best way to do that is to no-till drill. But in our world, again, here we go again, that's, not everybody's you can get those through the NRC office and stuff, but you can, let's be honest, not everybody's got a $10,000 no-till drill sitting around. So if you can rent one, that's great. If you have the tool to do them, that's great. But a lot of these folks that I'm helping on are on these small parcels where it would take longer to get the machine there to rent the machine to get the paperwork signed than it would to plant your food plots. So what I recommend is going back in and keeping it simple. Go back in June, the end of May, June, weather dependent. Go back in and you spread your rye and your brassicas back out again now, and then you pack it down. Now you've started the process again, and now you have that great stand of rye and buckwheat coming, and then you proceed your process in the fall. By doing that, guys, it will totally shock you on how much organic matter you're building. Now, if you want to do a rotation, turn these under. If the stem count kind of gets out of control, or you don't want to, you are steering from the chemicals, then every third or fourth year, then you can disc it under and you can start this process again. That's not a bad thing to do. I feel that there's some power in giving oxygen back to the soil. I know this is going back to years past, family farms, everything else, but doing the tilling every year is totally destroying the organic matter from above and the water retention from below. Is because you're aerating it every year, you're opening the soil up, you're heating the soil up, and it just keeps going through. Yes, you'll get there. You will get the organic matter and the water retention that you need sooner or later, but in our world of food plotting, sooner is what we want, not later. So a couple tips there, guys. So next time you're out in your yard and you wonder, hey, why is my drain field area in my yard outperforms the rest of my yard? And the reason is you can do a simple test. Take your drain field and your septic system area and try to match that in an area the rest of the yard, like I have here, that sandy loam, and the rest of the yard down below, and see how much money it takes to compete with the rest of the yard to make it look like this area, your septic system. And the reason is it's water retention, so it already has the power that it needs from below, and then it maintains itself from above. But in the food plot world, in these food plots that we're creating and trying to maintain, that's not the case. You don't have a lot of water retention, and so you're fighting a losing battle. So to me, the best way to get there, the quickest way to get there, is to fight both of those battles. You can have the best looking plot from above, but the reason that they fail is going into the heat of the year, and after August and those September months where even if it's a perennial through July, let's say, the reason that is there's no water retention. You can have the best top cover as far as the organic matter, but if you do not have water retention, it's a leach. It's just, that's why I don't use triple 19 fertilizer. You put triple 19 fertilizer in a water bottle, put an ounce of it in there, shake it up, and it's gone. It's salt based. There's nothing there. It leaches. What is it doing? Is it giving power to the top of the soil? It is. Problem is once your area, your plot needs water retention, there's nothing there because it just drains through. That's why we use the Dairy Dew line of products, is to help maintain and to build that water retention the quick as you can. But the simplest way, the best way to get there, is obviously use the 844 first. Get that rye and that buckwheat to explode in these plots the first year. You might have to fertilize them a couple of years, to get the good height every year back to back, because you want 3 foot of that rye and buckwheat. I mean, you should be walking in it, should be just below your waist kind of deal when it comes August. And then when you crimp that on top or roll that on top of your brassicas after you broadcast those in, now you have all kinds of thatch. You're keeping that totally cool. And the thing that what hooked me on this is when Grant did his a webinar that I was involved in a month or so ago, a couple months ago. We had been implementing this obviously in the past, and then I watched that webinar and it just opened my eyes. When you can go into a plot area that has this thatch cover on it, and you can take a spade shovel, and here in this location, the temperature is in the 80-degree mark, and 2 foot from there, it's 120, 130 degrees. It totally blows your mind, and that's how it affects every food plot that I've ever done this on. Moving forward, like I said, I'm recommending, so in my proposal I walk people through this. At the end of it, make sure they know how to do this, what they need to get to this. I strongly feel that this is the thing that everybody needs to do. And then if you want to do a perennial, guys, that's great. Just make sure, I highly recommend, just make sure that outside of the perennial of being, planting your rye and your buckwheat, clover, your chicories, your alfalfas, just make sure that that's really what your farm needs, and make sure that your money is being spent in the right spot, so you're not thinking that you're controlling the nutrition factor of the herd, when in a lot of cases, more so than not, you're throwing your money down the tube, and you don't want those summer deer there to begin with. You want those deer to know that you are the safe haven, you are the grocery store, if you will, come fall. And I see this, back to back. I'm on farms every day, and this is what I see. This week we've got a couple properties coming up here, and before my son has surgery at the end of the week that I've got to get done. And these are the things that I see every day, and I want to make sure that this is something that you guys kind of understand the process of how this goes, and the reason that you have to have not only organic matter on the top of the soil, you have to have water retention below. Now if you start on these plots, like I said, that have no water retention at all, what you're doing is you have to start somewhere. You can't physically go in and excavate your whole food plot out 2 foot down, fill it with the correct topsoil that you need, and then start. It costs you a fortune. So the way to do that is to start on top of your shady soil, let's say your soil that's not, that's subpar soil, and build from there. So you're building from the bottom. Now you're building from the bottom up. So you're gaining organic matter, you're building organic matter, and you're gaining water retention, all in the same system. It's a very, very powerful tool, and I think it's something that in the future here you're going to see a lot of people going to, and it's because it's simple, it's easy to maintain, you're reaching your goals, and it's very powerful come fall, and you're hitting those. You're making sure that your plots, you have to make sure, seed outside before you worry about planting, before you worry about anything other than making sure that food plot's in the right spot. The thing you have to make sure is the soil condition is correct, your pH is correct in these plots, and the only way you're going to get there is make sure that your water retention is correct and is going to hold moisture in these food plots in the heat of the summer, and that's through the Buffalo system. Thanks, guys.